Another interesting story about dynamite. My dad was working the Yellow Rock mine. He passed away when he was 85, and it must have been about 4 years later I got a phone call from the Santa Quin Police Department. And they said that we had dynamite all over the mountain down there. I said, well, you got to be a little bit more specific. Where is it? And so they told me the whereabouts of it. And I knew that was where my dad was storing the dynamite inside of it was a high-grade pothole where there was some galena in there, and the old-timers had mined that out. And Dad put a door on it, and then he'd keep his dynamite back in there. And so I was sitting with that dynamite. It was all crystallized.
Oh, man.
And it was just covered with the most beautiful nitroglycerin crystals. And I didn't know what to do with it, but there were all these sticks that were all over outside. And I figured, well, heck, they didn't go off and kill somebody when they removed them from the case. So I gently picked them up, and I put them all over in this one area just off of the mine dump, and I sat down on a rock, and I started peeling the paper off of the dynamite sticks. It was gelamite. And I would put the paper down and throw the paperless stick of dynamite over the mine dump. And I must have done that to, probably 20, 30 sticks of dynamite. And I didn't get quite all of the paper off of this one, and I didn't dare rip it because it was really thick crystal right there. So I just took that stick and tossed it over the dump, and it went kaboom!
Oh, man.
And it knocked my glasses off, and my ears are still singing to this day from that explosion. But boy, you just don't, I was with I think his name was Von Hale's grandson, and Von was my dad's partner at the time, and they were working a mine out around Cedar Fort, farther out west. And my buddy, his grandson, and I were 22 hunting. We were going out looking for bunny rabbits, and we saw these holes, just natural little caverns in the mountain, and we went up to explore, and we found this old wooden case of dynamite, and it was almost full, and once again it was just covered with crystals, and we didn't know anything about it, so we picked it up. I took one end, he took the other, and we carried that dynamite down the mountain about a quarter mile away from my dad's mine claim. And there was an old abandoned house trailer that was sitting there. And we put that box of dynamite underneath the house trailer, and then we went back up into the hill about, I'd say 100 yards. And we both aimed at that box of dynamite and counted to 3, pulled the trigger. And it was interesting to watch as that whole trailer seemed to lift up off of the ground in one piece, and then it completely disintegrated when that whole box of dynamite blew up. Well, we had shrapnel that was flying past our heads, and we'd kind of taken cover so we could just peek up over and shoot at it. And there was shrapnel that was probably thrown for a good quarter mile from that trailer. And my dad felt the vibration when he was working in his mine, and he came out to see what it was, and he noticed that that trailer was on fire. Well, there was hardly anything left of that trailer. And he saw us walking down the hill. He said, "What the hell's going on?" And I told him I was honest. I said, "Well, we found this box of dynamite and carried it down and shot at it and blew it up." Once again, damn fool.
So for those that don't know, that old dynamite, like when it starts crystallizing like that, it's unstable, man. You could just move just wrong and it'll blow up.
Breathe on it and it could blow up. I'm really lucky to be alive. That I can't believe that we carried that whole box probably a half a mile and along with that other dynamite that went off. Yeah, I've hardly had time to go through the records I do have. They're fascinating when I do find them. There was a suitcase, I didn't even know what was in it, that I had brought and never looked in it, a Samsonite suitcase, and our basement flooded when we had a home in Park City. And the first thing my wife did is she ran down there and salvaged that suitcase. That was the suitcase that had the claims to the Lost Rhoades mine, the map to the mine. It had dance cards from the 20s when my dad was courting my mother, and they'd sign, every time you dance with a different gal, you'd sign your name on the dance card. And this is where I got all of these records of the different prophecies. And one, the end would come when they build homes, and I think, what did they call that? But it's Point of the Mountain down there. You know, they've got homes clear up on top of the mountain now. And it said that the end would come when there are homes built on that mountain. And that the only way that that we would survive was that we would have artillery and batteries of men and machines on the mountaintops to fight against the encroachment of the enemy that was coming in after us. And it would only be through the gold that is given to us from the Rhoades mine and from the Coil mine and the Bullock mines that mankind would be saved. And you know, there so much gobbledygook was taught, it makes a person wonder what is true and what isn't true. But I tell it like I heard it, and I really try to keep it as accurate as I can. Now, when I start embellishing, watch out. I do have one interesting side note. My grandfather, I guess I was about 18. No, I was younger. I think he died in 59 or 60. So I was only 9 or 10 years old. And he took me up on the mountain and he pointed straight down and he says, "Dave, this is where the trapper is buried underneath those gold bars." And he had his dowsing rod and it was dipping and it was telling him that the gold was right there. And Dad finally started a tunnel in over there to go in and get that. Never found a mine tunnel or a cavern or anything, just never found it. But so there was some people that were interested in that story. His name was Dan, and he had an acquaintance, an Indian by the name of Verl, and Verl was an earth talker, and he took me off into the twilight zone with some of the stuff that he was saying about the property down there at the mine. And we went up there and I had an International Scout, and I parked my Scout right there on the Golden Relief mine dump. And I wanted to take him up and show him where my grandfather pointed out where that gold was. And so Verl came with me and he walked up, but Dan, he had I call him a doodle bug, but it was a rod on a ball bearing handle. So you couldn't really influence, unless you tipped it, you couldn't influence the direction that thing was turning. And so he went over, I told him this is an ancient mine dump here, and I've dug down into that mine dump and I've pulled out charcoal or carbon, really? Which is what they would mine with. They'd heat up the rock in the face of the tunnel and douse it with cold water and it would fracture. So I went with Verl, the Indian, up there, and I was telling him, and he was getting messages from the earth, and he says, "Dan, bring your gold checker." And so Dan walked up there, and when Dan was walking up, that rod he had that he couldn't influence by holding it. It defied gravity, and it pulled out and did at least a 20-degree angle, and was pointing into the ground right there, right where my granddad had told me that that gold was there. I've had people come up with sound devices, and they would map that area. Never found a thing. And my grandpa always says that the Lord moves in mysterious ways, and he moves the gold in mysterious ways, and we'll never find it until it's time. And he didn't ever find it. And Grandpa never really made money in all of his mining. And I've got stock certificates of almost 30 different mining and oil ventures that he had. And in all of those, he was just never able to produce. When I have people telling me, well, we can go down and look for that gold, and I think I know where that gold is and all that, I think, well, there's a story, and I enjoy stories, but I really, as far as spending money on searching after those kind of treasures, I'm surrounded by treasures right where I'm at. And I'm lucky to have it. And I see all these people that have lost everything, pouring it into a mine. And yeah, hopefully someday I'll stub my toe on a gold bar. But as far as my wanting to get out there and become a wealthy man, I already have as much wealth as makes me happy.
That's what it's about.
It is.
What makes you happy. And so, but you watched your family's dreams, was to strike it rich, to find a gold vein, to find them gold bars, and it never ever happened. They worked their lives looking for it and never found it.
I'll tell you another story. When I was a little boy, my dad took me over to my grandpa's house. Grandpa invited me to go down into his cellar one time, and that just scared me to death because it was dark down there. But he walked down the stairs, and Grandpa had been in an accident, and he had some of the bone in his leg taken out, and he had a shoe with an extra high heel that would compensate for his limp. But he didn't have his shoes on, and I'll never forget his clomp, 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 going down those wooden steps. And he says, "Come on down, Dave," and he pulled a string and a light came on. And so I went down, and I was looking around seeing all this stuff, and he says, "You see that box over there, Dave?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "Well, that's an old dynamite box, but I call it my story box. And you go over there and grab a story out of it, and I'll tell you about it." And so I walked over, and boy, there was a fur in there, a fox fur. There were drill bits, kind of like this old drill bit I got here. I found that down at the mine last time I went down. It's all worn out. But he had me bring this story, he called it, over, and I don't even remember what it was that I'd found. And he says, "Come climb up on my lap and I'll tell you about it." Well, he told me about Montezuma's treasure. And he says that he had gone down to old Mexico and done a lot of research, and he had come upon this ancient old transcript that was written in Spanish, and it was a record given by either one of the soldiers or porters that brought Montezuma's treasure north from Tenochtitlan. And he told me where they buried it, essentially, and how they did it. And it took thousands of porters to bring that kind of wealth. You can imagine how heavy gold is, and they've got to bring it up a long ways. And what they did is they excavated, and they took all of the trees and shrubbery, all of the live foliage, and they preserved it and set it off to the side, and then they dug through the top layers of the soil. It just must have been real sandy, and they stored all of that, and then they chiseled and they mined and made an archway, and they made a big cavern under the ground, and they put all of this treasure in there, and then they put the capstones back, they brought the soils back and put it in, and they planted the trees back. And he told me that they had killed as a sacrifice the porters that had brought it up. And then the soldiers that were to guard the porters and keep them from running off with the treasures, they were sacrificed after they'd filled that all in and restored the land, and they were all killed. And from what I remember, he said there were either 2 or 3 high priests or whatever that knew where this treasure was buried. And then they went back down to Tenochtitlan. And there's a lot of stories about Cortez and how Cortez, those soldiers, when they were booted out of Tenochtitlan because the Aztecs finally found out that they weren't gods and that Cortez wasn't a god, and so they had a battle, a big war, and there were a lot of bridges from one land spot to the other, and the natives would burn the bridges and kind of lock these soldiers, and they'd stuffed their pockets full of treasures, and they just loaded themselves down, and then they were forced to go into the sea, and they drowned. Well, it took years, but Cortez was able to come back, but by that time they had spirited that wealth away from their homeland there in Tenochtitlan. And then this story that you come up with Daniel Lowe, and that was so interesting. I just saw that yesterday that you posted it, and boy, he's got me wondering about the stories that I heard about the Montezuma's treasure.
So what did your grandfather say about that? Did he try to track down Montezuma's treasure when he found that?
Yep, and they found it was supposedly in a crescent valley, and they had done enough exploring and found what they thought was the location of it, and it was private property. And this was during the uranium boom. And they tried to get permission from the owner of the property, and the owner would have nothing to do with it. He didn't want uranium being mined on his property. He didn't want to be responsible for atomic bombs. And they weren't able to do anything as far as searching for it. But I always remembered that story, how my grandfather found the documents, and he had them translated from Spanish into English, and that really gave him a desire to get down there and start working. So Dad and my grandfather...
I know you got a lot of documents of different things that your dad, your grandfather... Do you know what happened to that document? Have you came across it? Has your brothers come across it? Do you know?
You know... It's just been recently I've been going through what records I was able to salvage from my dad's estate. But Dad had a big file cabinet, and Neil, my brother, has that. And I'll bet he hasn't taken the time to really go through and look for any of those documents. This is an oil dowser that my grandfather used. He found it. It belonged to somebody else, and he took a look at it and determined how he could make his own. And this is just one of them that he made. But he has located oil fields, up in Idaho, southern Utah, Wyoming. He says that there's so much oil in Utah and Wyoming that it's just unfathomable. And now it's been proved. I mean, he's been dead for 60 years. But you just watch that thing go, and I'll bet if you took a bearing on this, it would be pointing towards the oil refineries down in North Salt Lake. But that's the
and then show me your
dowser.
this thing that he had.
Now this, I'm gonna go to these next. This is how most, and Granddad, he used to use a willow, you know, just a forked willow, and these are from a you're looking up the Dewey Decimal System in the old catalog files in the library.
Oh, yeah.
That's what these are, just rods.
Were these your grandfather's too, or those
No, I
yours?
made these.
Okay.
But what this keeps wanting to do is point towards the gold. And so you got to wonder, well, which one? Which one is pointing towards the gold? Because it's, you know, as you can see, it's crossing.
Yeah.
Now, if I were to get this off my finger, if I were to take my gold ring and if I were to look for the Lost Rhoades gold, this one is not in my hand right, but I try not to influence these as much as I can be honest. But you can see how they kind of intersect in a line towards my ring that's on that stool down there. And as I walk towards, they start paralleling each other. And as I get over the gold, it marks the spot. It's right down there. And Kathy didn't believe, my wife, she didn't believe that I could find things. And so I told her, I said, let's do just like what my dad did. He sent me out. He says, go a quarter mile away. Be sure you can identify the sagebrush bush that you pick. But pick a sagebrush bush, break a branch off the sagebrush bush, and bring it back to me, and I'll find that bush. So I thought I'd outsmart him, and I walked off like I was going that way, and I snuck around an arroyo, and I went completely the opposite direction. And he had rods just like this, and they pointed directly in the direction that the sagebrush was. Well, I brought the piece of bush back, and he just rubbed it in his hands, and he held a few leaves, and then he held it in his hands. And he found that bush. He walked straight to it. He didn't veer his course at all. He went directly to that bush. And that's what convinced me that these things work. Now, if my wife were in California, I could say, where's Kathy? And these rods would point to her in California. You can find anything you're looking for with these rods. If I were to say, find Kathy, whoa, it gets out. So it's just my pointing rod. She's out somewhere. Let's see what happens. Find Kathy. Now if I followed these and kept going, I'd go right through the bedroom and into my fifth wheel trailer where my wife has an art studio, and she's out in the art studio. If you ever come up with missing children, you could find them, and you don't have to have a piece anymore. I've got this down to where all I have to do is think in my mind what I'm looking for, talk to them, tell them if I want refined gold or if I want refined silver. I could say, where are the closest silver coins? And all I have to do is think about it. And the silver coins are over there in my case. And I really have to consciously try not to control them because I know where it's at.
Oh, yeah.
So if I wanted to know where the closest silver mine is, this one isn't moving at all over here. So it's probably not too very far away, judging by the way these are pointing. They would intersect where the silver is. And so I was thinking of a mine, which would probably be a Spanish mine. Where would the closest Spanish mine be? Wow, that's pretty forceful. It almost yanked it out of my hands.
So have you used this to try and find some gold bars, some Spanish gold bars or something for yourself, or you just don't do that?
They don't really work for me in my own enjoyment. I can play with them. And
they work?
But when it all, I think, comes down to, do you really need to know where they're at, Dave?
Yeah.
You know, I've looked, and I've been able to find, well, my wife, she hid a piece of a shrub from her backyard. She hid it in her house and told me to go find it. So I had to expel the thought of the shrub that's outside. I didn't want to look for that shrub. But I had a little piece of it. And so I put it in my hands, and it pointed and took me into her dining room, and they crossed against the wall in her dining room, and that shrub wasn't there. And she just started smiling. And I thought, yeah, she thinks she's got me. She thinks she's got me, that they don't work. These things don't work. And she says, you found it. It's just that you're not in the basement.
Oh, really?
And that piece of shrub was exactly where these needles were indicating, but in the next level down.
Huh.
So I enjoy playing with them. But as far as my being able to find anything other than my keys, you know, I even think of keys and look where they're pointing. They're right behind you there. Huh. So I've got a lot of faith in these. You have to have faith. My grandfather really pushed the fact that in order to operate these, you have to believe.
I think you're right. I think there's something to them. They don't work for me, but I think it's because I'm a skeptic. But I've seen people find things with them. However, people trying to find, you know, the Spanish mines, whatever. I've watched a lot of people dig a lot of holes and never find nothing, but I can watch them find, I can go hide something, and they can find it.
Now,
you know,
we were rebuilding the Sprague Library, and we're looking for the, no, this was the Chapman Library in Salt Lake. And we needed to find where the water line was that came in, and I just got, that's how I made these, as they came from one of the catalog files that we were discontinuing, and I just pulled out a couple of rods and bent them and located the line that the pipe was coming in, and they were able to dig down in the floor and locate it. So I can do stuff for other people.
Yeah.
But for me, and I think it's because it's been pushed down my throat so much in my whole life that we were going to strike it rich, that we were going to have this, we were going to just have, you know, I was going to have a train ride, a real train, a miniature train up on our mine property. That was one of the things my dad would tell me, you know, when we strike it rich, you can have your own little miniature train up there, like was up Provo Canyon at Wildwood back in those days. And there's...
So show me this one.
All right, this is the one, my brother described this. My grandfather, I think this is a flute case. And what he has in here are all of these, let me get some glasses so I can see what we're looking at. But Granddad, he's got a lot of these bottles, and he's got them all marked. This is called male, so I guess if you're a woman looking for a man, you might screw one of these bottles on here. But there's all different kinds of different rock formations that you might want to find in order to get the minerals that you're looking for. This is coal, for example. And so he's got in here, he's got diamonds, he's got silver. Let's see what that is. It's tourmaline gold. You can see the gold in the bottom of that. But you don't need much. All you really need is a representation of what you're looking for. And I've learned in my fiddling around with this, he called it his doodle bug, that I don't really need the bottles anymore.
Yeah.
I use the old library rods.
Yeah.
And all I need to do is tell them what I'm looking for. But this one, let's see, where did the handle go? It's over there. This one is what my granddad came up with. And boy, I've watched him work this, and he's worked with me to work it, but this has gold on the end of it.
That's some little bottles, so you just screw them to the end of that.
And so if I want to find the nearest gold body, then it should start to indicate. Now see how it's going all skibbledy-wampus? And so it's pulling. And oh, okay, now I know what it's doing. It's finding the nearest gold body. Do you have any gold in your fillings?
Yeah, I do.
All right, so it's pulling. I can tell it's pulling towards the left, but it's combating. It's fighting this. Now look at this. And I'm really trying not to influence it. But it's fighting. There's more gold to the left. And so you take it, now it's starting to even out. Look at how fast it changes. And look at that. Bam. Right on my ring.
Huh.
And if I pull it away, it will immediately start losing it. It has to reorient. And I've really tried hard, and then if you can find out how far away it is. And you can stipulate for every dab before it goes in a circle or changes course, it could be 1,000 feet or a half mile. And for my granddad, it was, for each dab, I think it was 100 feet, something like that. But this is really, to me, this is a treasure.
Yeah, yeah, because it was something that it was owned by your grandfather, or your grandfather made, and yeah.
Now there's, I've got diamonds in here, raw diamonds, and when my granddad passed away, he had bequeathed this to me.
Oh, really?
And here he's got Einstein's new theory, and it talks about how elements attract themselves. That's why we're attracted to humans, because we're humans, and we're a herding type animal. You know, we've got to be around people. And the same thing goes for gold. And if it's, there's even different kinds of gold. So you can look for different types, and that kind of gold is only like in the Dakotas.
Oh, yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And so, and it's Einstein's theory, and my granddad really truly believed that an element will look for itself. and it'll be attracted to itself. And so
Cool.
there you have it.
David, thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
I think it's cool.
It is cool.
I really like it.
It's cool because it's part of your family's history
Yeah.
and you got it.
Yeah.
You know, that's
My old
cool.
granddaddy's.